There we are. Hey there, Donna. How are you?
Good.
Good.
How are you?
Doing all right.
Some nice Des Moines weather we're having.
It is, yes. That is for sure. Yes.
Good weather for the fair.
Have you been to the fair out there yet?
Mm-mm.
No.
I went twice last year, so I don't know if I have to go this year or not. So
Okay, you took care of it last year.
yeah.
It probably hasn't changed.
Yep.
I don't know. The new funnel cake this year was pretty good.
Is it? Oh, I was just looking at the ones that were submitted. One of them was, gosh, it was like barbecued beef, I think, with what they thought was Cheese Whiz, dipped in corn dog batter and deep fried. It had a thumbs down.
Yeah, I was gonna say that does not sound that great to me either.
No,
not good.
But the baked potato that had mac and cheese and barbecue brisket on it, that was
that
delicious.
sounds better.
I heard that was the best. That was the winner, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
I don't know, but I could sure see why, because it was one I made sure I had while I was there last week.
All right.
And that's a funnel cake.
No, that's a potato.
That's just a potato. Okay, all right. I was like,
don't get too
we were
crazy
talking
now.
funnel
No,
cakes. It's like,
no.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be that would be like the year they did the enchilada funnel cake, which was not great.
Ooh. All right.
So no, the funnel cake this year is like butter. So it's just like butter flavored icing. So
okay. All right. Fair enough. Looks like we've got a pretty good group coming on here, so that's awesome. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Brittany, how are you?
Doing well, thanks, Terry. Multitasking here, live from the Peloton.
Oh, yeah, good for you. Mine's in the other room. Not Peloton, though. It's a different brand that was less expensive, but just as nice.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's a great way to take meetings. You got to do that, pedal over easy conversations, right?
My partner that I work with, she has a treadmill for her desk, so she'll walk during meetings, which I thought was a really clever way to sneak in that exercise too.
Oh, for sure.
I have some coworkers that do that, so you just watch their head go like this.
Yeah, right.
You're like, we're on the treadmill today.
Yes, we'll watch you for our exercise today. We'll feel better afterwards, I'm sure. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and get us started. So just real quick, we'll run through a couple announcements and then we'll get right into the meat of today's meeting. And so this is our Lunch and Learn user group. This will run about an hour, and we're talking about Screenflows today. Clarissa is going to lead this for us today. She'll be awesome. I'm certain of it. And then I wanted to show you what our next ones are. Clarissa is also going to do the September 15th one, right? Is that right?
Yes.
All right, that's what I thought. She's given me a break, which is so nice. I feel this like huge relief having her on board because it's not having to manage all of this stuff. It's been fantastic. So kudos to Clarissa for stepping up and helping. But she will be talking advanced Screenflows next time around. We'll then have our main quarterly meeting on October 20th. And that one we need for you guys to share some fun things that you've done with Salesforce, because this one really is kind of about you.
So for stress for Salesforce, it is at the time when we do a refresh, we do a full copy into stress, but then
I'm thinking
test is
I'm thinking that's probably not related to our conversation. So, all right. So if you've got something that you've done in Salesforce you'd like to show off to the group, even if you don't like to show it off to the group, but you did something cool, talk to me about it. And we'll see if we can figure out a way that we can either coerce you into doing it, or maybe we'll help you do it or do something. But we would love to see what you guys are doing in the community. And probably one of the most asked for things that I hear from you all is, man, I really like it when we see what other people are doing. And so this is that opportunity. So if you've got something, even if you don't think it's all that cool, talk to Clarissa or I about it. We would love to give the opportunity to all of you all to share something that's going on in your org that certainly you're able to share it, but would be helpful maybe for the rest of the group to see. Then we jump back in November back to flows. This is really now more advanced stuff, so that we're talking more invocable flows and some of the capabilities of engaging your development team and what you can pull off with Flow by doing a combination of your admin and developer work within Flow. Very cool stuff that we can do with invocable flows. And then our holiday party, Mingle and Jingle celebration that we have annually, that will be December 8th. We'll get both the November and December invites posted on Bevy probably in the next month or so. But just to get it on your calendar, those are your dates. I'm going to kind of skip that one. Community Dreamin' events and Salesforce events that are coming up. Mile High Dreamin' is in Denver on August 31st, Florida Dreamin' in Orlando in October, if you're interested in any of those Dreamin' events. And then Dreamforce, the big conference is September 20th through the 22nd. If you are going to Dreamforce, you mind just kind of throwing your hand up in the chat or on your screen? That would be cool. I'm just curious if anyone is going. That would be awesome. All right, sweet, good. We will probably, I know a lot of times as a group, we will kind of connect with each other while we're there, maybe do some fun stuff together if we can. So be watching for some of that. We'll get some of that all put together as well. And then the last one I have, I think this is my last one, MVP office hours, just a reminder of that. That's every other Friday at 1 o'clock. Those are super ways to get help from really smart people. So if you get stuck on something in Salesforce, you want some help, definitely go to the MVP office hours. Then automation hour is actually it's tomorrow, and I'm the one that is the guest speaker tomorrow. So I would love to have you guys join that tomorrow. It's at 2 o'clock. You do have to register, so automationhour.com. And I will be your primary speaker. And if you're not going to make it to Dreamforce, this is kind of like the first presentation or my first dry run of what I'm going to be sharing at Dreamforce. So automation hour tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Flow office hours, we just had that last Friday, but if you're stuck on Flow and need some help, Flow office hours is a great option for you there as well. I don't have the date right on this. The Intro to Salesforce from DMAC class, that is coming up. Again, I don't have the right date. They postponed it a little bit, but I think that is still on. So if you're interested in the Intro to Salesforce class, that is available at DMAC. And then our Slack channel, I'm going to just move past that fast. And welcome, everybody. With that, I'm going to be quiet, let Clarissa take over from here. I'll stop sharing if I can find it. Just one reminder, though, we are, and I know Zoom already told you when you're logged in, but we are live streaming. So just keep that in mind. If you're not able to be recorded, you're more than welcome to watch on the live stream as well.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I will go ahead and share my screen. And we'll just share the whole screen. Okay, we'll start with my beautiful slide deck that I slaved over. And today we're just gonna talk about like basic Screenflows. So nothing too crazy. So I won't be offended if you feel like I'm telling you things you already know. That's totally fine. Feel free to tune in next month when we tackle more advanced stuff. But to preface this, I did want to talk about some of my flow best practices. I have 2 slides. I'll just kind of go over them relatively quick. And I have these in great detail at my blog. I threw the link down at the bottom of the slide, but I did not use QR codes like Terry did. So these are Carissa's best practices for all flow types, regardless of whether it's a Screenflow. You'll see that I try to use most of these since we're doing an example today. We may not necessarily do all of them, like we may not bulkify because we know that our use case will only ever be for one at a time. But your basic things like using a consistent naming convention, create documentation. I actually, now that I dropped this in here, remembered that my 3rd best practice of limiting your triggered flows to 1 per object is kind of not really a thing anymore, given that Salesforce lets us control the order of execution on our record triggered flows. So that's not one that we necessarily need to hold to. So I'd probably change that to be smart and strategic with how many flows you have. You don't want it to be so overwhelming you can't figure out where things are happening. Try to reduce the number of variables you have. Never, ever, 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 ever hard code an ID. If you do, bad things will happen. I mean, not necessarily, but it makes your life more painful than it needs to be if you're hard coding IDs. Always use the description so that you, well, your future self and your fellow admins and whoever inherits your org after you knows what you were trying to do. Bulkify, if you're doing anything with more than 1. If you're going to operate with more than 1 record, bulkify it. Think about scalability. Never, ever, ever nest loops. That's how you make the flows fail. If you can, save any database changes for the end of the flow. Getting records is fine to do earlier, but I always try to do creates and updates towards the end. It just makes Salesforce a little bit happier. Include a fault path. Use auto layout. Be wise with your decisions. Use multiple assignments. So again, I will talk about these as we build our flows today. And if you want the whole blog post I wrote on it, please feel free to go visit the blog post that I wrote earlier this year on it. And then I also
Carissa,
yes.
Can I ask a question on that slide? And I'm sorry
Sure.
if I'm jumping ahead, but I'd
No,
love
it's totally cool.
Thank you. So number 5, the do not hard code IDs. That great advice. I always try and follow that. I have a hard time sometimes when I'm like trying to do like a record type. Do you have any tips or workarounds for when you do need to filter by record type of how you do that?
Yeah, I use the name. I do a get records and I get using the name of the record type.
Okay.
You can get away with hard coding IDs if you're working in a sandbox that has recently been refreshed, because then the IDs will be the same between your production environment and your sandbox environment. Where that becomes really important to not hard code is if you're like doing a new record type in a sandbox and then pushing it to production, it will have a different ID. So there are certain use cases, but I tend to go with you have to know the rules so that you can know when to break them. But if you need to handle record types or like profiles or roles or anything like that, my recommendation is to do a get records. for the record type. I will make a note. We can be sure we handle that in our next session if we don't have time to cover it today.
Now,
I'm honestly not sure if we have record types in the developer org to be able to demo it today, but
yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're trying to filter your flow, then obviously you don't have the ability to do that get.
Yeah.
What I've done in that case is I just do that decision or the get as the very first thing inside my flow, check it, and then I jump out if it's not the right thing. The other approach that I've used is using custom labels to hold IDs. It's still a pseudo. I mean, you're kind of sort of moving the hard coding to a place that you don't have to rebuild your flow, or when you do deploy it, you're just changing a setting in the custom label. That's an approach I see people use as well. It's just kind of moving it out of the flow to where it can be managed a little bit more conveniently.
Thanks, guys. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
Good question.
totally fine. We love interactive sessions.
I would just add in one more thing for those hard coding. Being an admin that follows another admin that did a lot of hard coding, I am constantly having to translate what all of those hard codes are.
Oh, right.
So that I can make adjustments. So
yeah, that would be a pain.
It's a challenge. Don't hard code. Please don't
Yes.
hard code.
Your future self will thank you. All right. I do also have some specific to Screenflow best practices. Format your text so it's pretty and fun. I've worked in places where we actually established like a style guide, just like you would for your marketing material. We had one for Screenflows, so that they all were the same and our users had a consistent experience. Customize your buttons, because I don't know about you, but previous, next, and finish get kind of boring after a while. So putting some fun language in there can just make your users a little happier. My third one is to use data tables. Probably not going to cover this in today's session, but it is on my list for our September Lunch and Learn. To use data tables if you need to have a user interact with various records, where they're going to be essentially anytime they need a list of records, use a data table. It's a lot easier than doing some sort of funky old school method of let's loop through this collection of records and display one per screen. There is a time and a place for that classic, but for the most part, I try to use data tables just for fewer clicks through the flow. Provide helpful error messages, because nobody likes the standard Salesforce message. It is meaningless to your end users. I promise they don't know what it means. Sometimes we don't even know what they mean. So I tend to go with standard messaging of something went wrong. Please try again, or please wait till your Salesforce administration team reaches out to you to try something like that. There are ways you can get more specific with those error messages, but as a rule of thumb, don't use the default message from Salesforce. It's not helpful to anyone other than an administrator or developer. Launch flows with actions. This is one because I know a lot of people who've especially been in the Salesforce ecosystem a long time have a tendency to use the old URL button. That is old school Salesforce way. Today, it's a lot easier to just do an action on your record. It also formats the flow in a more standard user experience way. So it puts your flow in the current Lightning style. So it makes it a better user experience. You'll notice I tend to think about user experience a lot. So that's where some of these came from. Using screens and loops for multiple records. This was born out of an actual thing I was doing last year where I inherited a flow where we were creating an account on a screen, do a screen, fill it out. And then it went to, okay, and now we're going to commit that to the database. And then we're going to ask them on another screen if they want to create another contact. And we're just going to keep looping through this until they decide they're done. That's the bad way. So we don't want to do it that way because, again, we're not bulkifying in that method. So again, this is probably one we'll tackle When we build on what we talked about today, we'll be tackling this next month, because that's just a little bit more advanced. If you've never used a loop before, it can get a little wild. Okay, using subflows for repetitive tasks. I usually go with, if I'm using the same 3 to 4 elements over and over again, that merits having a subflow. Sometimes depending on what it is, and maybe there's just one element you keep using over and over again. An easy way to do those kinds of things is to put it in a subflow. You only have to build it once, just make sure you have the right variables, and then you can do repetitive tasks over and over again across multiple flows. I tend to use this especially for my error logging flow. That's an auto launch flow that I use as a subflow quite frequently. Using stages and progress bars. This one I don't do all the time, but especially if you're doing something that has a lot of screens, stages and progress bars can be really helpful for your user, so they know just how much is left. Just like when you're filling out a form online and it says this is going to take 20 minutes, and it's nice to have the little widget at the top telling you how much farther you have to go. So those can be really helpful. Also using, oops, I meant to not click. There we go. Using on-screen error messages. Sometimes we have a tendency to wait until we're committing a record to surface an error message. I try to do as much as I can actually on whatever screen is collecting the information. I'm going to validate the information there, so that way the user doesn't have to go through the screen over and over again. I don't have to deal with, is the screen going to have the right value? If you just validate their input, then it's a lot easier moving forward. Okay, now on to our business cases. And because I was having fun when I was putting these together, I gave us the version of what a stakeholder might say versus the actual business case that we should operate off of. Because sometimes our stakeholders, especially at a small company, don't know how to write a user story. So what they may say is that accounts are not getting created consistently and seem to always be missing one or both of the addresses we need. How I would interpret this, especially in my solo admin days where I was the BA and the admin, is that all Salesforce end users need a standardized way to create accounts, including both billing and shipping addresses. This should be accessible in the sales and service consoles. So what we're going to do is build a flow that will deliver this functionality. I've conveniently already pulled up flows. We will click new flow. It is a Screenflow. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is drop in our screen. And here comes Carissa's naming convention. I like to label my screens numerically, so that way I'll know what order they're supposed to go in. It does get cumbersome if you start throwing in extra screens after you've already built your flow. That's when I also throw in like a little letter A afterwards. It's fine. You figure it out. You make it work for you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to call this account details. I'm going to add a description. All right. If you want, you can hide the header. I have a tendency to hide the header because the header is going to be whatever you name your flow. And lots of times I name my flows in a way that's meaningful to me, but not to my end users. So I generally hide the header and just kind of let it stand, and we'll use whatever headers Salesforce provides and go from there. And if you do that, you can also, if you want a display text or a header that's going to be useful, I would call my API name is going to be XO1 for my first screen. I'd call this header, and I'd probably do something like, please provide, oops, account details. And just to make it a little more visible, we'll make it bold, throw it in the center. But whatever I decide to do here, I'm going to want to keep this consistent across all of my flows. So maybe it's not necessarily instructions, maybe it's actually account details or create account, or whatever is meaningful to you. How do you want this to be with the user? How do you want the user to interact with it? Okay. And then something that Nana reminded me of in our last user group meeting is using this fields functionality. So This just lets me utilize the fields I already have. I don't have to do anything wild and crazy. I don't have to create like too many extra variables. I don't have to deal with screen component madness. It does require using a record variable. I don't have any. I literally just created this flow. So we're going to hit new resource. Our type is going to be variable. My personal naming convention is RV for record variable and then RV record object. So I'm going to call this RV account. If I were using multiple account record variables, this might be account to create or something like that. And again, we always add a description. So this is going to be account we're creating. Our data type is going to be record. And our object is account. Okay, so we'll hit done. And now this is going to give me a list of all my account fields. Now, it's important to remember that just because you have the field, it does not mean it's supported in this fashion. So there may be a field you need to use where you cannot use this functionality. For our purposes, I think we should be able to at least mostly use this functionality. All right, so we're going to want account name. So we'll drag that over. We're probably also going to want phone. And then the important thing that we got was our billing address.
Claire,
Okay.
so when you get to a good stopping spot, we've got quite a few questions that are coming in the chat.
Thank you, Terry. I was not even paying
Nope,
attention. I was
nope,
just
that's all
on a
right.
roll.
I can you let me know when you're ready and I can rattle them off for you.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Go for it now. All right. So the first question I had is from Chris, and it is the flow style guide available to share? That's a great idea.
So I don't have one to share, but it's definitely whatever your company uses as your like internal documentation tool. That's where I've put it in the past. And I'll have to dig it up and see if I still have one, but it was mostly things like, use this on your buttons. Your buttons should be this color. We had a policy where we did not do like questions with a radio button where the values were yes, no. Instead, we did that functionality with buttons. So just that kind of stuff where you're just documenting it in whatever tool your team uses as your internal documentation.
Yeah, I think the key to some of that's just consistency. Yes. Personally. It's kind of like naming convention. Just have one and use it consistently. The next question from Heather, found the field's data, but it doesn't let you put the asterisk to make a field required. And that is true. You don't have it's going to follow the rules that you have on that Salesforce has on the data itself. So on the objects. So like you can see when account name was brought over there, it did put an asterisk that's required. That's because Salesforce required it. It is beta, so hopefully maybe cross our fingers, that might be a feature that may come later.
Yeah. The other thing you can do to solve for that is do a decision element before you do your create that verifies that field got populated. Yes. So that's a good way to handle it.
Is there a validation on those fields if you scroll down on the right hand side?
Don't believe so, because all of that is handled by the object manager. Yeah. But that's, if we don't have time to cover it today, we may have to add another lunch and learn for this, Terry. I got I got all kinds of things for flows. Yes. But I have actually handled this before, where I don't validate something on the screen component. I actually do validations within decision elements, and then I have visibility filters on error messages that will show like below the field. So that's a good way to get around the field requirement, but still using that kind of out of the box.
Very good. Bobby has asked, can you have more than one dynamic form / fields within a single flow screen?
That's a great question. I am 90% sure you can.
Yes. Yeah, you can.
because I can just do it right now. So I just create another one. I mean, this is the same object, but you get the idea. I'd create it. And now anything I pick is going to be for this account instead of the other one. So I could theoretically drag that over here again. But this one would be for account 2 and not the first one. We'll delete that because we're only going to deal with one account today. Okay. Is that all the questions?
I think so. The other one is just kind of a comment. It looks like the only other one I had was emailed to me actually, and if you could at some point share your blog site again.
Oh, sure. Yep, I can do that.
Catch it. You throw
That's
that in the
fine.
chat.
I can throw that in the chat.
I
Right.
was searching for it and couldn't find it.
It's all good. Okay, so we have all the fields we need here. But again, if we want to provide a solid user experience, I would actually use some of the other functionality that we can get. I'm going to drag a section over. So we'll drag over a section. And this is relatively new. You can now add headers. So we'll say this is address details. And we're going to make it 2 columns, and we'll put our billing address over here, our shipping address over there. Okay, cool. Now, the easiest way we can do this flow is now we're just going to do a create. And we're going to say create account. So we're going to create from that V account. And that's it. Like that, this flow would accomplish everything we needed it to do. You would probably also want to add a fault path. Because it's a Screenflow, I am going to add, usually call this like error screen. It doesn't get a number because I put all of my errors going to the same screen. Okay, so then I would do my error message. So it'd probably be display text. And yes, I am cheating and looking at a flow I've already built on the other monitor, but it's fine. Don't judge me too harshly. All right, so you can have as much fun with these if you want. I've done, well, this is awkward. And then I'll usually make this bigger in the middle. And if you really want to have fun with it, you can also throw in a GIF if you work at a place that will let you do that. I have started doing this in all of my flows where I drop in a GIF. So yeah, you just need to add it. Oops. This is what happens when I talk and type at the same time. You just need to add it as a static resource, and then you can drop in the image name here. So that's our fun little error screen. So if I click save, again, process naming convention coming into play here. My personal preference is object, trigger, function. And fun side tip, you can also do a little convention here. And if you have like a ticketing system, I also put the issue key in brackets at the end. So then each time I make a change, I add a date stamp, a pipe, what I changed, and then the issue key. That's probably maybe a little more than some of you need, but the longer I work in Salesforce, the bigger the teams I work on get, the easier I find this method for everyone else understanding the differences between flow versions. So we'll go ahead and save that.
And then you have another question from Donna asking, when would you use a flow like this and how would you bring the flow up? How would you describe it?
That's a great question, and we'll do that right now. Okay, so this is probably one that I would put in the utility bar. So I'm going to go over to the app manager, and we'll say that our users use the sales console and the service console primarily. So we'll start in the sales console, and we'll go into edit. I will go into utility items, add utility item, add a flow. The flow does have to be active, by the way, so you want to be sure that you activated it. I did. And then we will pick our flow, which is right here. And now there's this little button. If you wanted to edit it, you could. I will call this create count. And maybe I don't like that icon, so let's use the fun little plus icon. If I didn't want it to be the first one, I could move it around wherever makes sense to you and your users. Go ahead and save. Oh, no, I'm in the service console. Let's go to the sales console and see if it's there. It may not be. Oh, there it is. Look at that. And of course, Chrome is hiding it with the URL, but this is my flow. Now, this is kind of a poor user experience. So probably what I would do is I would go over here and make this wider. Maybe I want to make it 400. And now if I refresh the page, see if it made that better. So this is one I definitely play with. Again, this is why we do things in sandboxes before we push them to production. I would play with this. It doesn't necessarily have to be this 2-column layout. This is just something that makes sense to me, especially because I could add like a toggle to copy one value to the other, which we can do. Let me just do that real quick. So we'll go back here and we're going to add a toggle. And maybe because of how that user experience was, I actually only want this to be 1 column. Ugh, fine. Move this over here. Now delete it. Okay. So I'm going to make my toggle. My API name is going to be 01 for screen 1. Though I did see that there's actually a field for the addresses are the same. But I don't know what that field does. So we're just going to do it this other way real quick. The billing address is shipping address. Active label yes, inactive label no. And we're going to leave it probably defaulted to true. And that way, what we can do is come down here to our billing address field. And we'll say that I only want to show this when that toggle is set to false. Okay, so now what's going to happen is the user is going to just see the shipping address, and we're going to default this toggle to true. If they click the toggle to make it false, we will expose the billing address. But the next use case we need to solve for is, okay, if they're doing that, but we require both shipping and billing addresses, we need to populate this even if they've only provided us one address. So the next step we do there would be a decision. And we would say addresses are the same. Again, trying to give a description that's meaningful to future me and other admins. Also, never name your decisions yes, because then you have API naming issues. So I always do a yes, a comma, and then whatever the decision is. You can also have fun with this too. I have done like mic drop as the name of the default outcome. This is stuff that only your admins are going to see. Have as much fun with it as you want, as your company culture will allow. Salesforce does not have to be monotonous and boring, friends. Okay, so now we're going to use that same toggle, and we're going to say value equals true. This is our default value, and I'm going to rename the default outcome to nope. They're different. I always rename my default outcomes because it's really obnoxious to see default outcome on here 17 bajillion times. All right, so then we'll do an assignment because we need to set the billing address to be whatever the user has put in the shipping address. So we'll say set billing addy to shipping addy. I didn't used to put spaces in here, but now that we have this new flow builder, I no longer camel case all of my names for my actual elements. So I think that is a difference between the Carissa method and the Terry method, but that's okay. If we worked at the same company in the same org, we'd want to standardize that. But
yeah, just be consistent.
Yep. Okay, so now I'm guessing since it's an address field, I'm actually going to set these individually. So we'll do billing street. The best part about picking this particular scenario for me is that I've actually done this so many times in my career. So many times you have to deal with addresses. Okay, so we'll do billing state. I'm not going to do all of these just in the interest of time, but you get the idea. I'm assigning each of the individual pieces that compose the address because the address is a special field type that you can't just say, set this compound field to equal that compound field. You do have to pull the pieces individually. So if I were doing this the right way, I would put them all in, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to stop here and hit done.
Just a note there, you were copying billing address to billing address on that.
Was I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, look at you. We'll correct that.
I thought if you're going to cancel out, I wasn't going to worry about it, but it looks like you're moving forward. So
it's fair. All right. So we'll have the street and the state we'll copy over. That's our expected behavior. So that's how we would handle this situation. So now I'm going to do a save as. I'd probably, again, following my own self-described convention here. Copying shipping to billing. If I had an issue key, I would apply it at the end there. We'll click save. Yeah, if I were a good admin, I'd debug this first, but just so you can see what this looks like to the end user, I will confess if I'm working in a sandbox, I don't always debug things first. I live dangerously. I have my own sandbox. I don't mess with any of my other admin stuff. Okay. So now what we see is that billing address is hidden. And then if I click the toggle, now I have the billing address to add. So we can just go ahead and actually test this functionality. And I won't give it a phone number because I was bad and didn't require that in any capacity. And we'll put we'll say that that's in New York, New York. All right, I'm going to leave this toggle set. Moment of truth. Did our flow work? It did. So now up here, hopefully it's that one, my very cleverly named. All right, so as expected, we only copied the street and the state, but that did work as we wanted it to. So that solves use case number 1. Are there any questions that I need to address at this point?
I should have been watching and I wasn't. How many rows can we get in the description for notes?
That's a great question. I will tell you that is a limit I have never encountered personally. So I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah,
but at the
I've
moment,
not ran into it either.
My guess is a lot. I've been using this method for a couple years and it hasn't bit me in the behind yet. So at the moment, no limit. I'm sure there is actually a limit, but I don't know what that limit is.
It's probably like a text long would be my guess if I were.
I'm sure. It's
So
probably
probably in that 30,
100,000 characters or
yeah,
whatever.
something.
And at that point, what I would do is I would go down to the bottom and start deleting the older stuff. Or just create a whole new flow, you know, whatever you're feeling. All right, so we will go into business case number 2, which is, in the interest of time, I'm just going to tell you, we're going to create contacts using a similar methodology. Again, this is one where you would actually have a use case to do this. Just as a side note, if you wanted to, you could actually replace the Salesforce like default account or contact creation with a flow. If you want. That's a thing you could do if you were feeling like that was what you wanted to do. Okay, so we will go create. Oh, I left my flows. All right, we'll create a new flow. So I'm doing this as a new flow, even though what I would probably do, again, for a good user experience is include this in creating an account, because I'm probably always going to want a contact to go with my account. I'm actually going to create it as its own flow so that way I can also make it standalone, where it does not have to function off of an account. So we'll go ahead and create a screen. And again, we're going to call this contact details. Again, we're going to go ahead and do our record variable. And so we'll do contact. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop full name in here. And let's do, I think, phone and email were what my business case that I needed to have. Mobile phone and email. So all of this should look pretty familiar. We just did this. So this is all stuff you just saw me do. But what you haven't seen me do is put in a special component. This is one from Unofficial SF. I will go into detail further next time with Unofficial SF. But because it's a contact and I want this to function as a standalone flow, I need to be able to give a way to attach an account to a contact. So this is just a component from Unofficial SF. If I go to the top of the page, it's going to give me like a nice little picture of what this is going to look like. It actually will go multiple layers down. Like if you wanted to do a lookup for an account and then a contact at that account, you could. But this is one that I've already installed in our org. So I have access to it here as quick lookup, and then I just need to give it some values. So I'm going to say that this is on my first screen. Account lookup. The default value, I'm actually going to create a variable for the account ID so that I can pass this from my launching flow. Something else I could do if I wanted this to be an action on an account, I could set this to record ID. I'm not going to do that because if I wanted to do that particular use case, I would just use a quick action and not a flow. But
you have one more question in the chat if you're ready for it.
Give me just 1 second to finish creating this variable. Okay, what is the question?
All right, if we display pick list values, can we hide/display the below inputs based on each value that's chosen?
So you would not necessarily do that with the quick lookup feature. The quick lookup is literally going to be you're looking up a record that exists. For pick lists, there are multiple pieces of functionality available. There is a standard Salesforce out of the box version. There's also multiple components that people have built to handle field dependencies, record type filtering, all of that stuff. It's totally use case dependent though. If you're struggling specifically with something, feel free to like shoot me a message in the Trailblazer community and I'm happy to work with you one-on-one on that. But I would say that's probably a good one for advanced flows because that can get pretty advanced.
Yeah, I think the basic answer is yes. The quick answer.
Yes.
It's how you go about it is going to be the part that makes it a little trickier.
Okay, so for this particular component, all I'm doing is I'm saying the object we're looking up is account. I want to display the name, but I want to store the ID. Pretty standard type of stuff. If I have the variable for account ID provided, that's what I want to show up in this box. All right, and then I'm gonna hit done. And because I did not use a field, the special field functionality for that, I do need to set that as the account ID. So we'll say set account on contact. And then we'll do account ID equals, this is my lookup. I want the output value. Okay, and then I want to create that contact. I'm just going to create one. We're creating all from this. And then again, I would probably want to add a fault path on my error screen. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to drop a display text on here. Come on. And we'll do a second because we're sad that it didn't work. Okay, so we'll hit save again, contact. Oops. I really like pipes. You don't have to use pipes. Use whatever makes sense to you. I just like pipes. All right, and then again, we'll do 15. Okay, so we'll hit save. We'll activate it. And then what we'll want to do, because we probably want to tie that into our account one, is that after we're done creating this account, I'm going to launch that puppy as a subflow. All right. So then we'll pass in our account ID. All right, so save this. And we'll activate it, and then we'll come back over here. Okay. And we'll give this a similarly boring address. But we'll set this in my homeland of Wichita, Kansas. We'll leave everything set to the same. And look at that. Okay, so this is something I want to fix. Like, oh, that's just showing the account ID. All right, so that's going to be a problem. This is what I get for not debugging things first, right? Because now I can probably create this. It may give me an error. See what happens. All right, so if we look for, oh, look, it created this. Is it orphaned? It is orphaned. All right, so that was a Carissa fail for not making sure that setting that as the default value was going to work. So that was on me. So if we wanted to fix that, what I'd probably do is actually change this. So I'm not going to use this as the default value. Instead, I'd set my component visibility so it only shows if I'm not passing in an account ID. All right, so then what I would do is a couple of different things. Yes, I am actually building this in my head right now. It's fine. Okay, So we'll do a decision. Is the account ID provided? So we have account ID. So we're going to do account ID is not null, which means it has something in it. Okay, so just put that there. Okay, so I just copied this so that what's going to happen in this decision tree is that if we are passing in an account value, we're hiding the lookup for the account. And what we're going to do is set the same field. Instead of pulling it from that lookup, we're going to pull it from our variable. And I'm also going to rename this so that it makes sense. If you copy things, which a lot of us have a tendency to do if you're building a big complex flow, you'll want to also clear out the API name. Otherwise, you won't be able to figure out what's going wrong in your fault messages, especially because everything will just end in _0. So, okay. So what should happen is we'll start here. If we're passing in the account ID, then we'll follow this path where we're going to set the contact to be from the account that we are pre-selecting. And if we are not passing in the account ID, then we will use the account ID from our screen. Okay, so we'll save this. And just to be sure, we'll debug it and make sure that it will actually let us look up an account. I'm not going to pass one in. And that didn't work because I'm still saying this. So, did I forget to set visibility? I did as null true. Oh, sorry, that's a dumb cursor moment. That's what I wanted it to do. It's fine. All right. So then we can select our account here and we're good there. Let's see. I don't know what I've clicked and what I haven't. All right. That looks good. Save. Activate.
So just a generic question for you. Is there a reason that you like the unofficial SF lookup over the Salesforce lookup component?
I just have a tendency to use unofficial SF stuff because it makes more sense to me. Honestly, I feel like the documentation is easier to know what to put where.
That's a valid point. That's true.
So that's a big reason why I gravitate towards unofficial SF components, because they will actually say, put this in this field when you're configuring it. So it's a personal preference.
I've navigated between both, just because sometimes I like the user interaction from unofficial FF better than the Salesforce option, and sometimes it's vice versa.
It just depends.
Yeah, it's nice to have options.
Feeling Bob things today. Okay, so
We're down to about 4 minutes as well.
Yeah, I was trying to hurry through this.
All good.
I'll just skip my last scenario, which is fine. It was the fun one. Okay. We can save it for next time. I should have known that I could only get through 2. Okay. So now we actually are appending our contact to the right account. So we know this is good and working. All right, so I did have one last scenario on let's send Bob some ice cream, but sadly, I think that will have to wait for another time.
You can send it to me instead. I'll take your ice cream. It's all good.
Right. That works. That works. So that's pretty much what we have time for today. Are there any questions that did not get asked as we were going through everything?
That is everything I have in the chat window. Feel free to unmute if you have a specific question, or you can add it to the chat window. Either one.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with Screenflows?
So confession, I've been building flows for at least 5 years. So at this point, I think it was probably a bigger hurdle to get used to using the flow builder than to use Screenflows. That being said, I'm way more comfortable with flows than I used to be, and it just became I just use them a lot, and that's the scariest part in a lot of things I find about Salesforce is they're intimidating. So using Screenflows in general, I would say was probably a good 6 months before I felt confident in them. And even then, like, there's still things I do where I'm not sure it's going to do what I want it to, but we'll give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I would say that's probably about where I was too. Coming from a developer background, there was a lot of pieces of flow that made sense to me, which I was able to apply, so that helped. But as I am working with other admins and helping them learn flow, it probably takes about that, and it's nice if you've got a coach helping you when you're with your first one, because especially if it's a little more complex, because you can learn and flow really, really fast if you've got somebody helping you navigate through it. And it's a use case that's specific to what you need to actually have. That's a great way to learn it.
I would say too that honestly knowing flow made it a lot easier for me to understand how to code. So the reverse version of Terry, where I was able to understand how Apex triggers and classes worked because I understood flow. So I would just start relating things there. I think I actually wrote a blog entry at one point where I actually called out, if you're used to building flows, this is the part of the code that is this part of your flow.
Yeah.
So it can help you in either direction.
Thank you.
And Clarissa did put the her blog post or blog site in the chat window. So for those of you looking for that, that is there. Just a reminder, since we're at the end of our time today, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the community, where either Clarissa or I, one of us, or somebody else from the community will certainly answer those for you. Flow Office Hours is another great place to get help. If you go to flowofficehours.com, and then please come to Automation Hours tomorrow. That would be fun to see you there as well. That'll be we're talking about flow there as well, and helping it hopefully will help make some sense of some of the different concepts of flow as well. So all good. Thank you guys. Thanks, Carissa. Fantastic job as always. And you all have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.